Hello, 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 and welcome back to Spin Cycle Live. I'm your host, Nathan Hale, and today is Friday, May 30th, 2025, our last show in May of this year. Isn't that crazy? My gosh, I can't believe that May is already almost over. We're already almost into June. Years flying by. Crazy, crazy. It feels like just yesterday I was sitting here at this desk covering the 2024 presidential election. It feels like yesterday. I remember it so vividly in my mind. If you haven't watched our live stream on that, if you want to go relive those events, they're up on Rumble and YouTube, I believe. Actually, I think it might just be on Rumble. I think YouTube took down our stream like 45 minutes in for some reason. So there's that. Anyways, so last show of the week, just as a reminder, our shows are coming out Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 6 p.m. All the different platforms: YouTube, Rumble, Instagram, X, all of them. And then we have our reruns going out Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday at 8 p.m. So if you want to watch at a different time, we got you covered. You want to watch old episodes? YouTube, Rumble is your place to go. Anyways. Let's get into our first story of the week. I should let you know also, if you hear any banging, loud noise in the background, they're still adding a whole other story on top of this whole building here with galvanized steel and, bunch of stuff going on. So if you're banging, there's construction happening upstairs. I can't do anything about it. Sorry. So just the current state. That's why you should share this show with friends, get more people watching it. Get some more revenue coming in. Maybe I can move into a house. Anyways, let's get right into our first story. This comes from the New York Times. So a federal judge has temporarily blocked the Trump administration from banning Harvard international students. So a Massachusetts judge has ordered the federal government not to make any permanent changes to Harvard University's student visa program. Judge Allison Burroughs issued a preliminary injunction Thursday morning as Harvard University lawyers squared off with the Trump administration in a Boston federal courtroom over the government's attempt to prevent the prestigious school from admitting international students. Quote, "I want to maintain the status quo in allowing the school to resume accepting foreign students and visa holders," Burroughs said, telling the sides to hash out an agreement to temporarily halt the freeze on Harvard's student program. Quote, "It doesn't need to be draconian, but I want to make sure it's worded in such a way that nothing changes," she said, with Harvard's lead attorney, Ian Greshengorn, telling the judge he doesn't want any shenanigans to take place once the order is set. Now, riddle me this, Batman. If we want to maintain the status quo and make sure nothing changes, then what's the point of pausing students coming in, right? So basically what you're saying is like, oh no, we don't want anything to change. Well, yeah, we don't want Trump to not allow international students to come to our universities. Duh. Obviously, they don't want anything to change. They want the money coming into the universities from the international students. You know how much money they charge international students at universities? Way more than American students, that's for sure. Obviously, they don't want anything to change. So I think it's funny that they're sitting here like, oh no, we don't want any major changes to happen. We don't want to see shenanigans. We just don't want it to happen, right? And in doing so, that basically is a shenanigan, right? So I don't have an issue with the Trump administration pausing student visas. Let me remind you, the reason why this is happening all in the first place is Harvard won't hand over the backgrounds of these students who are there internationally to the Trump administration, right? Everything in the United States right now that has to do with illegal aliens all revolves around making sure that people are documented being here, right? There are no Republicans in Congress, or very few at least, who are outright against immigration, against other people coming into our country, right? We are pro-legal immigration, right? We want people coming into our country to be documented so we know where they're coming from. We want to know who these people are. We want to know if they are drug dealers, if they are human traffickers. We want to know these things. So when crimes are committed, and they will be, we know who it is, and we know how to prosecute them and how to go after them. That's all the Trump administration is asking for here, is just some simple record keeping as to what these students are getting up to. And despite what the left may say, you don't have a right to be in the United States if you hate the country you're in. We have international students here who are protesting on campuses against Jewish people. We have international students here who have signs saying death to Jews in the United States. Right? If you're a citizen, you have the right to do that here, right? Because you've earned your place in this country. But if you're here visiting, if you're here as a guest, go back to where you came from, right? Go protest Israel wherever you came from in the world, right? Go back there. You don't have a right to be in this country if you hate the values that we stand for. That's all I have to say about that. All right. Let's go move on to our next story. So China apparently is getting up to some shenanigans. We were talking about shenanigans in the last story. China is the one who's getting up to shenanigans here. So Trump is accusing China of violating the trade agreement they have. Quote, so much for being Mr. Nice Guy. President Trump said on Friday that China, quote, has totally violated its agreement with the United States as the administration continues to negotiate with the communist country on a larger trade deal. Trump said that despite his efforts to save China from a very bad situation, the Chinese government did not abide by its deal with the United States. The president did not specify how China broke the agreement, but Trump's top trade officials have said that China is slowing down trade talks and failing to fulfill its promises from the 90-day tariff truce struck between the two countries earlier this month. The deal agreed upon earlier this month between the United States and China brought Trump's so-called reciprocal tariffs on China down to 10% while keeping the 20% fentanyl tariff in place. China, meanwhile, dropped its retaliatory tariff on U.S. goods to 10%. Those new tariff rates went into effect May 14th, but would only last for 90 days as the United States and China continue to negotiate a larger trade agreement. Trump's post on Truth Social blasts China for violating the deal came just hours after the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told Fox News host Bret Baier that the talks with China are a bit staled. Bessent added that negotiations will hopefully resume in the next few weeks. Similarly, U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Geer told CNBC that China has been slowly walking in its compliance with the trade agreement, particularly regarding the flow of rare earth minerals, which China promised to again export to the United States after restricting shipments in response to Trump's tariffs. Quote, we haven't seen the flow of some of those critical materials as they were supposed to be doing, Geer said, adding, quote, China continues to slow down and choke off things like critical materials and rare earth magnets. So is this any surprise to anyone when it really comes down to it? China has never played by the rules when it comes to international relations. Never. I mean, you can't really point to one time that China really has been playing by the rules with anything that's been happening recently. So I'm not surprised at all that this is happening. And I'm going to be interested to see how the Trump administration navigates getting China back into complaisance. So first, I thought that Trump was friends with all these guys, right? I thought he had a great relationship with Xi Jinping way back when he was first president, right? He was always saying how great of a relationship he had. What happened to those relationships, by the way? So I'm interested to see how they're going to handle this because, I mean, we can't have this. We need to have a fair trade agreement with these adversaries. I'm glad to see someone like Trump is in office to handle people like this. I think it's one of his strongest suits is navigating our enemies, right? I mean, we've seen how he's handled Russia. We've seen how he's handled China. We've seen how he's handled North Korea. We've seen how he's handling right now the Middle East. And I think that he's a great negotiator when it comes to handling our enemies. And I'll be interested to see how he handles this going forward. I think that my biggest concern is that China just won't give in, period, and there's nothing that we could do about it. So that's why I said, I mean, I'm not totally sure how this is going to end up for the United States, but I'm people are on a rock and a hard place right now. So getting China to give in and give us exactly what we want is going to be hard without giving them also what they want. So, and they don't like to negotiate. They want to have what they want, and the Trump administration wants what they want. So I don't know. We'll be sure to keep you updated going forward on all that. But yet another tussle that happens in the trade war between China and the United States right now. So anyways, let's move ahead. Got another New York Post story. So Fed's preferred inflation gauge cools to lowest levels since September, calming rattled markets. The Federal Reserve's preferred inflation gauge cooled to its lowest level since last fall, helping to calm jittery markets Friday, despite raising trade tensions between U.S. and China. The Personal Consumption Index, PCE, index rose just 2.1% in April compared with a year earlier, down from 2.3% in March, and the lowest since September, according to data released Friday by the Commerce Department. Excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 2.5% from a year earlier, below the March figure of 2.7%, the lowest in more than 4 years. Economists track core prices because they typically provide a better read on where inflation is heading. The Commerce Department data came out hours after President Trump accused China of violating a trade agreement, ramping up tensions in a trade war that has roiled global markets and businesses. Traders continue to bet that the U.S. central bank will cut its target with short-term borrowing costs in September. At 11 a.m. Eastern Time, the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 45 points, or 0.1%. The S&P 500 lost 17 points, or 0.43%. And the NASDAQ Composite dropped 103 points, or 0.5%. The figures show inflation is still declining from its post-pandemic spike, which reached the highest levels in 4 decades in July of 2022. Economists and some business executives have warned that prices will likely head higher as Trump's widespread tariffs take effect, though the timing and impact of those duties are now in double after they were struck down late Wednesday in court. On a monthly basis, overall prices and core prices both increased just 0.1% from March to April. So I think that this is interesting. So the PCE, the personal consumer expenditures, is the lowest it has been in more than 4 years. In 4 years, that's great. I think that we're still experiencing some economic uncertainty as to where prices are going. Prices have gone up. That's just a fact of the matter. They have. They certainly haven't gone down since the tariffs have gone into place. But inflation is evening out. So the question is that a result of the Trump administration and their tariff policy? Is that just the market overall slowing down and it's overall inflation? You'd have to do some more reading on it yourself. But yeah, I mean, I think this is great. It's good that inflation is going down. We want lower inflation. I think it's one of the things that the Trump campaign promised us was to lower inflation, and they certainly are doing that. So we're seeing it right now. I mean, it's the lowest it has been in 4 years. So that's great. Not really much else you can say about that. Go and read the full article for yourself. I didn't cover the whole thing. I really just wanted to get at the fact that inflation is down. But yeah, I mean, I think it's great. So let's move on. Great news from the Trump administration. We cover a lot of things on the show that Trump might not be doing so good, but there's also things that he is doing good. And if inflation had anything to do with his policy, I think it's great. So good job for them. All right, so let's talk about this now. So from the Daily Signal, so SCOTUS allows Trump administration to revoke legal status for 500,000 illegal aliens. The Supreme Court has allowed the Trump administration to revoke temporary protected status for 500,000 illegal aliens living in the U.S. In a 7-2 ruling on Friday, the justices lifted a lower court's order that barred the Trump administration from deporting illegal aliens from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela who entered the U.S. under the Biden administration parole program. The court's decision comes in response to Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem's efforts to end the Biden-era parole policy that allowed migrants from four countries to fly directly into the U.S. and be transported into the interior of the country. On his first day back in office, President Donald Trump signed an executive order directing DHS to, quote, terminate all categorical parole programs, including, quote, processes for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans. In March, the Department of Homeland Security issued a notice announcing the official termination of the program effective on April 24th, but the federal government blocked DHS from revoking legal status for illegal aliens in the U.S. under the parole program. The Supreme Court's order allows the Trump administration to move forward with plans to terminate the legal status of Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, Venezuelan migrants, while an appeal is pending before the First Circuit Court of Appeals. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson and Sonia Sotomayor issued a dissenting opinion from the order granting the Trump administration its request for a stay. Quote, the court has plainly botched this assessment today, Jackson wrote in her dissent. It requires next to nothing from the government with respect to irreputable harm, and it undervalues the devastating consequences of allowing the government to fictitiously upend the lives and livelihoods of nearly 500,000 non-citizens while their legal claims are pending. The Supreme Court rulings Friday come just 2 weeks after the justices issued an order allowing the Trump administration to proceed with plans to strip temporary protected status from the thousands of illegal aliens from Venezuela living in the U.S. I have no issue with this. This is great. We have to get under control who's coming into this country and who's not. Like I said, I have no issue with people coming here legally, but we have way too many undocumented people in this country. They need to go. You need to get them out of here, right? We have millions of people in this country who are living here without documentation, right? We don't know who these people are. We need to get them out of this country and allow them to come back in through a port of entry legally. We need to have documentation on them. We need to know who these people are, where they're living, and what they're doing here, right? Any self-respecting country knows who the people are in their country are. They don't just have an open border and let anyone come in. They don't just have all these programs in place to allow people just to let themselves in and fly directly into the middle of the country. So I have no issue with this. I'd like to point out here, though, that there are 3 liberal justices on the Supreme Court. Elena Kagan was in the majority of this case. So I think that we have a perspective that the Supreme Court always votes along ideological lines, and that's just not the case with this case in particular, right? One of the liberal justices voted with all the conservatives on this. So she did not join the dissenting opinion. And I like to point things out like that just to show that, the media loves to push the Supreme Court as a super, ideologically disbalanced institution where all the conservatives think the same way and all the liberals think the same way. Well, that's just not true, right? We've seen time and time again in Supreme Court cases where one or more of the liberal justices actually vote with the conservatives, or we have a couple of conservatives who vote with the liberal justices, right? So I respect the Supreme Court's decision. I mean, they're the highest court in the land. There's nothing you can do about it after they've made a decision about it. It's over. So this is great. This is great. Great news from the Supreme Court. All right. Our last story of the week, hits close to home. This comes from the Hill. So apparently Gallup did a survey, and they have found that the partisan divide on same-sex marriage is the largest in almost 30 years, according to Gallup. So Republicans and Democrats are more divided in their support for same-sex marriage than they've been at any point since Gallup began polling the issue nearly 30 years ago. The May 2025 poll shows a 47-point gap between parties. 88% of Democrats and 41% of Republicans said marriage between same-sex couples should be recognized by law as valid, with the same rights as traditional marriage. Last year, Republicans and Democrats were separated by 37 points. In 2023, they were separated by 35 points. In 2022, by 32 points. In 2021, by 28 points. And 2020, by 34 points. The latest poll shows GOP support fell to its lowest point since 2016, when 40% support same-sex marriage, 1 year after the Supreme Court's Ogefeller v. Hodges ruling declaring the practice constitutional. Democrat support, meanwhile, rose by 5 points since last year, reaching its highest level of support since Gallup began polling the issue in 1996. Democrat support has been relatively stable in the last decade, with the previous peak reaching 87% in 2022. Independent support has also been steadily rising in the past decade. The latest poll shows 76% of independents supporting same-sex marriage, just shy of its 2023 peak of 77%. Should be noted the survey included 1,003 adults and was conducted May 1st through May 18th with a margin of error of 4%. So only about 1,000 people were polled for this, right? So how much we can trust these numbers, it's up to you. Take it with a grain of salt. It's not like, 20,000 people were polled. It was only 1,000. So, let's talk about this. This is no surprise to me, especially when you're lumping in LGBTQ all together in one category, and you have half the community running around with all their clothes off in pride parades. It's just a fact of the matter. Support was bound to fall off for this, and I say this as someone who's a gay dude and supports same-sex marriage, right? The writing's on the wall. This is why there's been such a movement to separate the gay and lesbian crowd from all of the crazy queer and trans activists out there who are ruining the community for everybody, right? Because your average gay and lesbian couple, they're not up to anything nefarious. They're living their lives just like the rest of us and getting along with things. It's the trans and the queer folks who are the ones on the internet invading women's spaces, dressing up like women, going into women's locker rooms, going around Disney parks, talking about how they had their balls chopped off in front of kids at a table, getting upset when you misgender them with the wrong pronouns. When you lump all those people in together in the same group, you can understand how all of a sudden, when you say same-sex marriage, people associate that they don't really know what's going on with that whole group of people, right? They lump in the gay and lesbians with everybody. And when they hear things like same-sex marriage, when they hear things like LGBTQ, when they hear things like trans, they just assume it's all the same. And all of us gay and lesbians just all think the same way, right? It's been a huge issue recently with trying to get people to not think that way anymore. So I'm not surprised at all that same-sex marriage support has fallen. Heck, if I didn't know any better, right? I see stuff on the internet that makes me feel homophobic, honestly, when I'm looking at what these people are getting up to. We saw in pride parades year after year in Seattle, in New York, in Los Angeles, and lots of different cities, people going around these parades with all their clothes off. Like literally everything is hanging out with children there, right? And people see these on their news shows they watch, and they're like, okay, well, this is what the LGBTQ community feels like they should be doing. So I don't support that. Thus, I don't support same-sex marriage, right? So it's yet another reason why the community, the LGBTQIA++, the Wi-Fi password group, has brought this onto themselves, right? I've stayed out of it. I don't want anything to do with all those people, right? I just want to be a normal dude. And I see all these people over here trying to speak for everyone and walk around naked in parades. No wonder support has fallen, right? No wonder, right? So it doesn't surprise me at all. And yeah. Anyways, So just an interesting story that I found. I think it's relevant to the times that we live in, just what these groups are getting up to. So that's all I got to say about that. That is the end of our show for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great weekend. Remember, our show is on X, Rumble, YouTube, Instagram, all the platforms. We have TikToks. We have TikToks going up, right? Go follow our TikTok page before it gets banned again, right? Whatever happened to the whole TikTok ban, right? We've just forgotten about that, I guess. I don't know. I haven't heard anything about TikTok being banned recently. It's still up. So with that, I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Enjoy the rest of your month. We will see you in June next Monday. We will be in a new space. I'm going to be going out of town for the next couple weeks, so you won't have our usual nice backdrop in the background. But yeah, we'll be in a slightly different filming location, but we'll still get those episodes out to you because we know how much you love them. We know you love our episodes. Share this show with friends. Let people know how great the show is, how much you love my takes on the current geopolitical environment, right? How great my opinions are. But with that, I've been Nathan Hale. This has been Spin Cycle Live. Hope you have a great weekend. Peace out.